Hello everyone, in a recent video I discussed why I don't use the Jupiter rockets, in particular the Jupiter 1 was what I was focusing on, and the fact that it really can't do what it said it was going to do, which is try to use a whole lot of space shuttle derived hardware in order to make things cheaper. I said it couldn't do that because of structural problems, and also it led to very limited capability. You can see on this particular image that I shared in that video that we only have 35 metric tons to the moon here, which is less than SLS Block 1B. So here they are only using 2 engines down there, so I doubt they're going to get that. And in fact, my objection to the Jupiter 2 and Jupiter 3 largely rested upon the fact that I doubted the figures that we have here, the 80 metric tons to the moon for Jupiter 2 and 160 metric tons to the moon for Jupiter 3. And I thought that those were both ridiculous as well. I don't think that Jupiter 1 could get 35 metric tons to the moon either. But in this video, I'm going to focus on Jupiter 3 and demonstrating that it really can't do this 160 metric tons, and also probably shouldn't have that big a fairing. I've held a ruler up to the screen, and it is my opinion that the main tanks on this Jupiter 3 are 10 meters in diameter, based on the fact that the external tanks here are 8.4 meters in diameter, and that's known. So I've set it up like that, and then we have J2Xs. I don't have RS100s, but they said 1.5 times RS68B, so I just put 1.5 times the number of RS100s as RS68Bs, so that ends up being 7.5 of them, and so I put 8. So let's take a look at this in Kerbal Space Program, and I've put the 160 tons that they said that should be on this in here, and it's just abgas so it doesn't interfere with everything. And I've got fairings that are just 10 meters in diameter. They had their fairings go out a little bit, potentially to 12 meters, but I don't see a need for that right now. And this will make it easier on the rocket to carry the 160 tons, which I don't think it can do, so I'm giving it some help. Now, we start from the top, so we started with the payload, and we're working our way down here. And here we have the stage with 2 J2Xs. And I have assumed that this has to do the translunar injection. That means getting the payload out to the moon, and that we are not going to be using this stage to help with the translunar injection, because that would be ridiculous, because then this has to have RCS thrusters and maneuver to point at the maneuver, and we don't want it to do that. That's too heavy. So I'm assuming that this has to handle the entire translunar injection, so it has to have at least 3,200 meters per second. But it could have more, right? I mean, it's got 2 engines here. It's only burning for 5 minutes and 26 seconds. So why don't we have more here? I've mentioned before that the optimal amount of delta V for a stage is 4,480 in this case, 10 times the ISP in vacuum, and we're not getting that much. And of course the upper stage for Saturn V got more than this. So why am I only putting 3,200 meters per second here? Because take a look at the stage below it. We have, according to them, 5 J2Xs, and sorry about the model, but the numbers are right. Actually, it might be on the light side for J2Xs. I think their mass is only 2.47 tons, when it's actually supposed to be a little bit heavier than that, but otherwise the numbers are fine. But we've got 5 J2Xs like they said we were supposed to have, and the thrust weight ratio is only 0.55. I've put 4,200 meters per second in here because we need it. And I'll show exactly why. And that's 8 minutes and 20 seconds burn time, which is standard for a J2. That's what the S4B stage had. These can actually get 10 minutes potentially, but we can't put any more in here because the thrust weight ratio will get even worse. And 0.55 is already pretty bad for something that isn't going to get too close to orbit by the time it starts out. We've got 4,000 meters per second here and 4,206 meters per second there. It has to do a lot of work to try and get to orbit, and it's not getting to orbit right now. Right? These numbers do not add up to orbit. So what's restraining us? Well, first of all, they had the external tanks feeding those RS100s. Here we have the 8 RS68s. they're just normal RS-68s. I guess I need a B. So, okay, B. I don't think B helps that much, but we can put a B. So here we have a lot of thrust weight ratio, right? Once the boosters go off, we're at 1.41. It'd be great to add more fuel to this, right? Because we're getting off the ground at 1.51. We're ending up at 1.41 once the boosters separate. But their design doesn't have extra fuel in this. They're using the external tanks as they are, right? They're not changing those. So there's no room. Let's take a look at the diagram again. There's no room down here for extra fuel. It's only the fuel from those tanks. Now, if we put 3 of them, that'll be fancy, but that's not their design, right? I don't know if they said 2 space shuttle external tanks. So here we are. There's not enough fuel there. So what is the configuration problem that we have? First, we don't really need 2 J2Xs up here, because actually 1 would probably be able to do the burn as long as you're pushing it beyond 10 minutes. But, you know, thrust weight ratio in space, that's a pure space burn. It doesn't need to be that high. We do need more engines on this stage because its thrust weight ratio is too low, because it's doing a huge amount of work to get to orbit. We need more fuel on this stage because we simply do, because we can't get to orbit at all right now with the 160 tons. The boosters are fine. I have no objection to the boosters. The total mass of this is about the same as Super Heavy, 5,000 tons. So, first of all, we can't carry this payload to orbit. We need 12,500 meters per second minimum to get to the moon. I'll leave off the fairings and just judge by that. We could also possibly increase the size of this stage and decrease the size of that stage to help things out. They both have the same engines, so the optimal solution when they both have the same engines is to have both have the same delta V. So we'll actually make this smaller, but when you look at the diagram, their tank up here was actually very small. So it was as small as possible. This will help out the thrust weight ratio of this stage, but we could always just add more engines down here. But if we had 160 tons up there, we probably wouldn't get any benefit out of this. Okay, so we've rebalanced that, and we're carrying 122 tons right now. Let's just make it an even 120. And we're getting the right amount of delta V. Let's take it out and see if it works like this. Oh, this is down here. And we're just trying to get to orbit with enough to transfer to the moon. I haven't fit RCS on this right now. I'll leave it in the hands of ascent guidance. So I'll call this version Jupiter 3A. There will be other versions. So this version is with the lightened payload and extended upper stage and reduced lower stage. And then we can make further adjustments by just having one J2X up there, having more J2Xs down here, and so forth, and then actually adding fuel down here. And that's one reason I made this a fuel tank. So we can do some of that. But it gets complicated. Cross-feeding fuel from the 2 external tanks into a tank is more complicated than just having them like this, because they'd be feeding individual engines. You know, this one would feed 4, that one would feed 4, and it's direct. So that's a little bit more helpful. Alright, let's take it outside and see how this goes. If it can boost to 120, we can increase it. Well, we're on the stock pad instead of like pad 39B, but this will suffice. It's not going to change anything. And we'll go straight out. Well, incidentally, the tanks I used here are aluminum lithium tanks, so they're the same as the external tank would be. So I've made it as reasonable as possible here. And right now, ascent guidance is saying it'll end up with 3,700 basically, but it's not accounting for atmospheric drag yet. So we'll see how it does and whether I need to tweak it. Off it goes. The one time that I'm going to use Jupiter 3. I hope you enjoy it. I mean, I guess on the bright side, it can get 100 tons to the moon for sure. And only be one launch instead of being 20 launches to get 100 tons to the moon. But that's just throwing it to the moon, not capturing it around the moon. On the other hand, it's not recoverable. Maybe you could fit a heat shield and parachutes on the engine section for the RS-68s, but probably not still. Probably that's a little bit iffy. Well, I mean, ULA's got their balloons and whatever, so maybe. But already here, we've dipped below the amount that we need to get to the moon. We could potentially turn a little bit faster, but that would only increase the drag. I did make sure to fill the external tanks with the right fuel mix for the RS-68s, but it's the same fuel mix as for the RS-25s, so there's no problem. You wouldn't have to reconfigure those tanks at all or anything. Okay, well, sudden turn there. Well, maybe a booster pitch rate of 0.6 would be fine. It's not too far off, though. It's probably gonna try and wait until they're completely done. I'm gonna stage them when they would be staged. A little bit problematic on those Separatrons, but it's fine. My assumption is they're going to stage the fairings at the same time as they get through the stage because it's pretty close to where the fairing staging would be right. Ooh, those aren't the fairings I wanted to stage, but I don't know how those got staged, but fine. We're still attached. This will only make it easier for it, so I'm trying to be nice to it. We've already reduced the payload to 120 tons and it still doesn't look like we're gonna get there. So remember, we need 3,200 left once we get to orbit in order to transfer to the moon. Okay, our upper stage here. No staging errors to account for the problem. So we are going to make orbit with too little. About 400 meters per second too little. But this shows why I was so certain looking at that diagram that there's no way you could carry that much to orbit. It said 160 tons, we're only doing 120 tons and we still can't make it. So it took me no effort to realize that it was bogus. And this should give everybody caution. They should take a look at those diagrams of rocket designs and actually test them. No spreadsheets. Spreadsheets not good enough. Actually run it. Kerbal Space Program exists. I know it's not perfect, it's not reality, but it's a lot better than believing a diagram or a spreadsheet. So here we are. We are short about 400 meters per second. Let's see how much we have to cut down the payload in order to get that, and what other changes we can make to improve things. So first, cutting down the payload, and then when we improve things, we'll see how much better we can make it. We need 400 more. So approximately there, 108 tons. So that's what we're looking at if we want to actually get it to the moon. 108 tons to the moon. You know, it's still a good rocket. We're talking about getting 2% of its launch mass to the moon. It's just that they were promising the wrong thing, or whoever made that diagram was promising the wrong thing. So what other changes can we make? Really, the J2Xs could probably give us more. So we could just have one J2X here. Redundancy-wise, that's bad, but efficiency-wise, it's better. And then we can move the J2X that we took off from up there down to this stage, which really, really needs it. Let's actually, because I don't have editor extensions here and I can't put 5, I'll put 6. So we'll have 7 altogether here. Can barely fit 7 potentially. Maybe, maybe not. That gets us a better thrust weight ratio at that phase. And we will rebalance since now we have more thrust weight ratio here. Let's just extend this to be a 6-minute stage. That's just like the S2 stage on Saturn V. This is a bit long. We can probably cut that down to 12 minutes. I mean, ideally we would want the same delta V like I said before, but the burn time is also a consideration. So it's just double the burn time down there, and if we really wanted to cut it down to 6 minutes also, we would just put the second engine on there, but I think it can manage the 12-minute burn. I forget what RP1 sets the burn time limit to. So we have that. And now we have a little bit of extra delta V working there. So we can pump that back up. Now we're at 114 tons, though I haven't extended this fairing as much as it needs to be. They had the engines placed very tightly, though. They tried to minimize the interstages. But the interstage mass doesn't matter too much. Okay, so having rebalanced those with different engines, we can fill this up now and assume that we're going to have a tank here, a sump tank. And we'll make this an aluminum grid tank like the others. Unfortunately, every time I change the tank, it moves these up for some reason. Let me just change the length of it first. Here we're still not at a thrust weight ratio of just 1 when the boosters separate, but we're better off. We could potentially add more fuel to this, but I wonder, the burn time of the R68s should be fine. We're asking for 4 minutes from them, 4 minutes and a few seconds, not a problem. And now we can bump up the payload again. So we're at 126 tons now. Let's see if we can make that. So these are my improvements to the design. 1 J2X up there, 7 J2Xs here, and we need some more fuel. So just having the external tanks was not good enough. This is controversial. I mean, the others are going to be rebuilt anyway, but this one is a little bit iffy. We were talking about 339-ton tank here. But if we want to optimize this, that's the way to go. So, let's see. Let me make sure that the staging doesn't have the same error as before. Okay, I've increased the booster pitch rate a little bit as well. So, here we go. A little bit heavier, slightly less thrust weight ratio at the start. We're still barely maintaining enough right now. Oh, we should have better boosters. The configuration is currently RSRM 1981, so we could improve those a little bit. They're not gonna make us get 160 to orbit. A mild improvement is possible, though. Haven't improved the separation, though. Okay, it's still staged at fairing. Okay, well, it staged too many things, Ascent Guidance did. Okay, I tried it once again, but we had another staging mishap, so I'm done. I don't even like this rocket. So 126 tons to orbit is what I'm saying it can get. I'm not gonna try it. I've had enough. Jupiter 3, fundamentally flawed in many ways. This, right now, I've made it better, but still I'd rather just use my Kasei rocket. So, especially my Kasei 2. So we will see that rocket in action maybe, but for now I'll leave this be. This is enough of Jupiter 3. Let's not even talk about Jupiter 2. That's just silly. Somebody had pointed out peculiarity of that one. I'm sorry, I forgot who it was who pointed this out. But it's actually feeding oxygen from the second stage here into the first stage. It's got a huge oxygen tank up here, and it's feeding it down into here instead of having it in the first stage. And I haven't the foggiest idea why you would do that. Maybe it's so that they could have the thrust sort of section here, you know, where the boosters apply the thrust, but really normally that's lower anyway. But then they have 5-segment boosters as well. So yeah, that's just a mess and complicated and everything. So I don't want to. And it's got these weird thin tanks and then 2 RL60 stages in a row. Nope, I don't want to do that one. So I've done as much with the Jupiter rockets as I ever want to do, and I think my own designs are much better. This whole business of putting the RS-100s, or in this case RS-68s, at the bottom and feeding the external tanks into it, meh. So I mean it's imaginative, I'll give them that. But anyway, with that, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.